Hey, good morning, Terra Nova. I want to invite you to stand up. So glad that we're here together this weekend. We're going to sing this morning. We're going to celebrate communion a little bit later. Let's put our hands together. Here we go. I was an orphan lost at the fall, running away when I'd hear you call. But Father, you were to your will. I had no righteousness of my own. I had no right to draw near your throne. But Father, you loved me still. And in love before you laid the world's foundation, determined to adopt me as your own. You have raised me up so high above my station. I'm a child of God by grace and grace alone. Your home to seek out the lost. You knew the great and terrible cost, but Jesus, your face was sad. I worked my fingers down to the bone. Nothing I did could ever atone, but Jesus, you paid my debt. By your blood I have redemption and salvation. Lord, you died that I might reap what you have sown, and you rose that I might be a new creation. I am born again by grace and grace alone. I was in darkness all of my life. I never knew the day from the night. Spirit, you made me see. I swore I knew the way on my own. Head full of rocks, a heart made of stone. Spirit, you moved in me. At your touch, my sleeping spirit was awakened. On my darkened heart, the light of Christ has shone. Called into a kingdom that cannot be shaken. Heaven's citizen by grace and grace alone. So I stand in faith by grace and grace alone. I will run the race by grace and grace alone. I will slay my sin by grace and grace alone. I will reach the end by grace and grace alone. Write my story and call it good. I can't imagine a greater truth. Who is like you? You know what I'm thinking before I ask. You're in my future, you're in my past. It's hard to imagine the way you move. Who is like you? You give my eyes the light to see. You give my lips the words to speak. You give my lungs the air to breathe. You are my everything. You give my soul a song to sing. You give my heart 'cause I'll never live a day without you. This is too wonderful, it's incomprehensible. Don't have to imagine what I would lose, 'cause I'll never live a day without you. You give my eyes the light to see, you give my lips the words to speak, you give my lungs the air to breathe. Jesus, you are my everything. You give my soul a song to sing, you give my heart a melody, you give me every single beat. Jesus, you are my everything. Jesus, you are my everything. Jesus, you are my everything. This is too wonderful. Your love is like sand on 1,000 shores. You give and you give, and still there's more.
I had that song stuck in my head all week this last week. We learned it last week, and one of the things I really love about that song is it captures this part of the narrative arc, this long narrative arc of Scripture, that really everything we have comes from God, including the breath in our lungs, these moments that we have, our life itself. Like everything comes from Him, and when we give back to God or we bring something back, like in a moment like this, we're really just giving Him what's His, like what came from Him. We're responding that way. And I love that idea because it's not like, wow, God, look what I brought to you, but look what you gave me, and I reflect it back to you with this heart of gratitude. So I love that. I hope you connect with that kind of thing too. But hey, welcome to Terra Nova. Great to see you guys here. It's a great weekend to be here. We're going to be celebrating communion a little bit later in our gathering. You'll see the tables around the sides of the room. And so we're going to be spending a little more time singing and things like that later in our service. Looking forward to that. And we're in part 4 of our series, Investigating Jesus. Been having a lot of fun with that series. Today, we look at a scene that takes place on a lake, which brought a question to my mind. When was the last time you were at a lake? Like, has it been recent? Has it been a long time ago? And maybe which lake was it? Maybe it was Lake Forest Lake. Like that's the, or Lake Mission Viejo. I don't know. Big Bear, Mammoth, Tahoe, or maybe it was a little like more out of the area. Some of you have been to the Lake of Galilee, which is pretty cool. Or maybe that's not the most recent one though. Or like, I don't know, Lake Okeechobee, Lake Michigan. I don't know. When was the last time you were lake? What lake was it? So that's my question for you. Here's what I'd love to have you do. I'd love to have you be nice to the people who are around you. Say hi, introduce yourself, tell them your name, try to get their name and remember it, and then share your lake story. When was the last time you were lake? What lake was it? You got it? All right, ready, set, go. Say hi to people. Well, hey, welcome to Terra Nova again. Great to see you guys. I don't think I said this before. My name is John. So nice to meet you. And just so glad you guys are here. And by the way, if you're our guest here today, or it's your first or second or third time, you're kind of checking us out, wow, thank you so much for spending part of your weekend with us. And it's starting to turn out a little bit nice. So spending a nice day with us is even like, that's more of a gift. So thank you for being here. Just so glad you're here. Hope you enjoy your experience. When you came in, I bet you were handed one of these. We call it the weekend program, or at least somebody probably tried to hand you one of these. And if you take it out right now, if you get it in your hands, I want to show you a couple of things and walk you through this. This is a great just introduction to who Terra Nova is, and at least to what the week ahead or the next few weeks looks like coming up around here. And so when you open up, you'll notice we've got, hey, there's a Terra Nova Tours happening today. By the way, if you're checking out Terra Nova and you want to know a little bit more about who we are, this is fantastic. Walk-ons welcome. That's happening right after the 11 a.m. today. You can come back. Free lunch. We'll feed you. Take care of your kids. So that's coming up. You'll see there's other things going on. We've got a women's event coming up. We've got a worship night coming up. But when you get to the back here, you'll see this thing we call the Connect card. Love to have you. This is the group participation exercise for the morning. Love to have you fold that along a couple of times and tear that off and grab the pen that's sitting next to you and take a moment to fill that out. And again, if you're our guest, just so grateful you're here. Just tell us as much about yourself as you feel comfortable doing. Check off some boxes. We'd love to get to know you a little bit better, but you can also use this to get to know us a little bit better. You can check off things maybe you'd be interested in hearing a little bit more about. And you can ask questions on here. Hey, what's up with, or why do you, or so forth. And again, the tour is a great place to find out some of that information as well. And you can let us know how we can be praying for you coming up in the week ahead, or how we can be praying for and maybe even come alongside you with things that maybe some loved ones are going through, or someone you know, and maybe we can help you love them well. And so take a moment during our gathering. We'll get this from you at the very end of the service, so you have the whole service long to spend a little time working on that. But while you're working on that, I wanted to draw your attention to one thing in particular, because if you're wanting to know a little bit more about what Terra Nova is about, I think one of the best case studies of that is something we got coming up in a couple of weeks. It's called we were going to call it the Random Acts of Kindness Weekend, and then we realized there was nothing random at all about what we were doing. So it's like, well, that doesn't really work because it's not random. It's really very intentional and very specific. So we're calling it the Not So Random Acts of Kindness Weekend. I think that kind of works for what we're doing. And here's just part of who we are as a community. We want to make God's love famous, and we want to make God's love famous in our own communities, doing stuff to just love on the people that are around us, no strings attached. And we love to do that by ourselves, but we also really love to do it together. And so this is a weekend for that. And we've got a bunch of options that we're throwing out to our whole Terra Nova family. Here's how you jump in and play. One of them, we did this recently, like late fall, and it was so fun. We did a free coffee giveaway, just posted up at a local sports park, and gave away free coffee early in the morning. It was such a great experience. We're going to do that in a couple of different parks. You can actually do it in your own park if you want to. We can set you up for that. We've got a beach cleanup happening in partnership with Surfriders Foundation, and this is cool because this is a whole family. Bring the kids, bring your friends, bring your friends' kids, and we're heading down to the beach, and we're going to partner up with Surfriders to do some cleanup. And here's why that's kind of important right now: because of all these rains, the beaches have gotten a little polluted in the washes. So this is a cool way to just serve our community. Again, no strings attached, so you can sign up for that, especially if you don't get to the beach often enough. Like who does, and we live here, and now you can we'll go down to the beach and we'll do something good as well. Village of Hope is something we do every single month. We serve at the Orange County Rescue Mission. We prep a meal and then we serve a meal, 2 different teams. We do that every month, but this happens to be the weekend that we're doing that, and so you can be a part of that team if you've never done that before, and then if you like it, you can do that regularly. You can be a part of that. We're packing some backpack supplies for one of our local elementary schools. This is especially for high school and young adult, or not especially, I think it's exclusively for high school and young adult. So if that's you, that might be a good thing for you to connect with. And then we just added one. So if you saw this last week and you're like, I checked out because I already know what that is, you didn't see this one. So we had it in the works last weekend, but the deal just hadn't come together because this is in partnership with the city of Lake Forest. And one of the things they do as a city is they identify people in the city who need some help doing some work on their property, especially senior citizens. And so they had identified one, and we hadn't quite put everything together, and now it's all together. And so we're doing this just kind of this larger overall outdoor project for a local senior citizen who's been identified by the city as needing this assistance. And so we're just going to be the people who show up and make God's love famous. And so this is too like the Surfrider thing. This is an all family, all play. Bring the kids out, bring your rakes and shovels and garden tools and gloves and so forth. And we're just going to show up there as a community and love on one of our neighbors. And so here's the deal, super simple. You can check off one or two. Some of them happen at different times. And so you can go, hey, I could do that, and I could do that. And so you could check off a couple of things. And then really easy, just let us know how to get a hold of you during the week, what would be the easiest time for you, and we'll get you on one of those teams. But that really, in a nutshell, is like, that's who we are. That's what we do. That's our DNA. We want to make God's love famous right here in our own community, and we want to do it together. So love to see how you jump in, how we all jump in as a family. But like I said earlier, we're in this series that I've really been loving. I hope you've been enjoying too. I get a lot of buzz, a lot of feedback from people about what they've been enjoying about this series called Investigating Jesus. And so now we're actually in part 4 of this series. So let's jump into part 4 of Investigating Jesus.
Well, hey, it's so great to be with you as we're in this series where we're trying to get some answers to some questions. How do you know that there's really anything to the story of Jesus, and why would Jesus be worth following? Now, the questions tip us off that this is a series about our beliefs. Maybe even trying to figure out what you believe about, God and, faith and, the Bible and Jesus. And maybe you have a church background or not, or maybe you've had some bad experiences with Christians or not. But for all of us is that we all have beliefs. And so a fair question to ask is, what do you believe? And it's a fair question. It's an easy question to ask and to answer because everybody's got beliefs. But I think a better question to ask is, why do you believe what you believe? Now I've been looking forward to this month because in just a couple days I'm going to be jumping on a plane and I'm going to be heading out to South Asia. I'm going to be spending time with a team of 4 other guys. There's going to be 5 of us that are going to be going out, spending time with my son and my daughter-in-law who are there living on this island, helping them in their mission to share Jesus with Muslims. And so that's what we've been doing, and really excited to go. In full disclosure, there will be surfing there. And it will be warm. And so I'm very much looking forward to escaping the frozen tundra of Southern California and being in South Asia. And so we're really looking forward to it. It's been 3 years since I last was on the island with my son. It was in March 2020. It was right before the world shut down with the pandemic. I was over there. And while I was over there 3 years ago, I had a great encounter with a local guy. He was a local guy. His name was Henry. I'm really hoping that I'm going to be able to spend time with Henry again on this trip. And it was great because Henry and I had this great spiritual conversation. We were on the beach one of the days, and everyone was gearing up and getting ready, for the surf session. They're waxing their boards, put their leases on, and then everybody ran out into the water because the surf was really good. But I decided to stay back and kind of hang back with Henry because we were having a conversation that began in the car drive on the way over, and it just kind of kept rolling. We were talking about faith and belief. And the conversation had some real spark to it, because he and I came from 2 very different belief systems. And so on and on, we were talking a lot about what is it we believe, but then I wanted to shift things to finding out why Henry believed what he believed. And so in order to do that is I'd heard of a survey about belief that I wanted to illustrate to Henry. And so I got up from where I was sitting on the beach, and I walked on the beach, and I collected 10 stones. I collected 10 stones. I said, Henry, I've got these 10 stones in my hand. Let me tell you about these stones. He just kind of looked at me, scratching his head. Like, yeah. I said, yeah, these 10 stones. I want you to pretend that there's only 10 people on earth, and that these 10 stones represent the 10 people. And let's not just talk about what it is they believe, but let's talk about why they believe what they believe. And so out of those 10 stones, I took 6 of those stones, and I said, hey, Henry, I said, you know what, with 6 of the people that are on earth, or 60% of them, is that the reason that they believe what they believe, the why, is because of their environment. Because of their environment. They would say, the reason I believe what I believe is because I was raised that way. The reason I believe what I believe is because I was born into this family where that's what everybody in the family believed, okay? And so what it does is it speaks to the power of community and the power of the group as it forms our belief system, is that we usually believe the same things that the people that we hang around with believe. That's just kind of how it works. And for 6 out of 10 people on earth, that's the way it works for them. And I think that for these 6 out of 10, it's cool for them so long as they don't dwell too long on wondering what it is that they would believe if they were born and raised in another place, right? Have you ever, kind of pondered that and thought about that, dwelled on that? or these 6 people, they're completely good with it until they go off to college and meet some smart people that, challenge their beliefs and kind of deconstruct their belief system. And for some of you, that's your story. Or for some of you, that's the story of someone in your family, maybe one of your kids. So I put those 6 stones down, and then I picked up another 3 stones, and I said, hey, Henry, so here are 3 more stones. These represent 3 more people out of the 10 people on earth. So I said, so you see where I'm going with this, is that 30% of the people on earth, if you ask them why do they believe what they believe, they would say because of an experience. They would say, I had a dream. They would say, I had a vision. I got healed. Something miraculous happened. I should have died, but I didn't die. I felt something. Now experiences. Well, experiences are great, but they're pretty subjective, aren't they? I mean, was what you felt, as you slept that night, a touch from the hand of God? Or was it just the effects of the jalapenos on last night's pizza? I mean, what was it? I mean, no one can really know. No one can really tell. And so that's just the nature of experiences. But then I put those 3 stones down. I picked up the one last stone. I said, so Henry, here's the last stone. I said, say there's 10 people here on the earth, and it says one of them, or 10%. If you were to ask them, why is it that they believe what they believe, they would answer, because of the evidence. Because of the evidence. They would answer it and say, I did the research. They would say, I did the homework. They would say, I did some digging. I wanted to start with the evidence, only 10%. But isn't evidence really the most solid foundation of the 3? So in this series is that we've been looking at a biography of Jesus' life written by a man who wants to give us evidence. And this man's name is Luke. And Luke is not a tax collector or a fisherman like the other biographers of Jesus' life. He's a doctor. So that puts him in the top tier of the population with regards to education and training and science and thought and all that. And he's also not one of the 12 disciples, or sometimes known as the 12 apostles. And he's not a Jewish person either. And most of the writers of the New Testament are Jewish. And so because of this is that we sense that his research just might be impartial. And so he states the purpose of his biography this way in Luke chapter 1, starting off his biography of Jesus. He says this about it. He says, many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first, okay, so he's talking about really source stuff here, were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. With this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, and that's where we get the title of our series, Investigating Jesus, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty, not the subjectivity, but the certainty of the things you have been taught. No, Luke says to Theophilus, and by the way, Theophilus is kind of an interesting name, right? It's a Greek name. In the Greek, Theophilus would mean a friend of God or lover of God, and that it would be a common name back then, but also it could serve as an official title that would be given to someone with influence and authority. So to this person, Theophilus, he says, I've done my homework. I've done the research. I've investigated all the sorts, and so Theophilus, now here's the evidence. And then, as we've moved through our series, sure enough, is that we found that there's numerous outside of the Bible historical sources that tell us about Jesus and what he did, and also John the Baptist and who he was. And the evidence shows that they were real people, not fictional characters. And in fact, we have far more written down historical manuscript evidence for the life of Jesus than we do of any other historical figure of that time, including Tiberius, the very Roman emperor who ruled during that era. Now, some of you are history nerds, and so like when you hear stuff like this, it's just, you just really geek out on this. I mean, this is like really fun stuff for you and important. And so if you're looking for more, as I've got more, I got a suggestion for you. So you might want to pick up this book, Can We Trust the Gospels by Peter J. Williams. This book has chock full of great referencing and evidence and all of the historical background that I just gave you just a short slice of. And so you might want to grab that because after all, you're a history geek and God bless you, good for you. But for all of us, here's the thing. If you want to have deep, rich, durable faith, well, it just feeds off the evidence. And maybe up to this point, that's actually been your roadblock to faith, is that maybe for some time now is that you've wanted evidence, but you were unaware that any evidence even existed. But maybe there's another roadblock to belief, into faith, that we need to get over. I think there is. And I can sum it up in one word. And so we're going to enter into Luke's meticulous record of Jesus' life. And once we're done, I'm going to share the roadblock, the one word, and fair warning, it's a word that pastors just don't say as they talk about the scriptures. You'll see that. So I'm hoping then that our time together, here's where I'm hoping we're going, is that we can get over this roadblock that you might have together. All right, let's go ahead. If you brought a copy of the scriptures, I would like you to turn to Luke chapter 5. Luke chapter 5, you can go ahead and pull out that outline that we provided for you in your program and follow along as well. And as we begin, I want for us to recall what happened last session in Luke chapter 4. If you were here last time, this is Luke chapter 4, is that you were dropped down into this account of Jesus' life where he is led out into the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights. He's fasted. He is tempted by the devil himself. And the devil tempts him to meet the very legitimate needs that Jesus has in very illegitimate ways, just in the same way that we are tempted and that we see Jesus prevailing over that temptation. And then after that moment, straight away, it might be of just days afterwards, is that he goes and returns to the town that he grew up in. It's the city of Nazareth, or the town of Nazareth. And he goes to the synagogue there, and he speaks in the synagogue. And this moment in the synagogue is kind of like opening day. All right, have you ever been to opening day? Have you ever been, opening day of the baseball season, the first, opening day, first pitch, there's something special about it. Have you ever been to opening day in the ski season? They're just running one chair and the snow's man-made. You don't care. You're up there. You got your lift ticket, clipped to your pants. It's opening day. Have you ever been to opening day in fishing season? They started off, it's usually cold. You're suffering. It's early. But, there's just tons of people that are around the lakes because it's opening day. Well, in Luke chapter 4, it's opening day for Jesus' messiahship because Jesus takes the scrolls of the prophet Isaiah, opens them up. He reads, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me because the Lord has anointed me." And everyone knew that word anointed connected with the word Messiah, which meant anointed one. He folds up the scrolls. He sits down and he says, "Today, this very day, that this has been fulfilled in your midst." He's saying this scripture that was written hundreds of years before is this today, here now, in this place in Nazareth, in the synagogue. It's on. It's on. The kingdom of God is on. My messiahship, it's on. And so it was, as we read through the rest of chapter 4, is that we see Jesus just moving, and just beginning just to pour out goodness upon the land. He's healing people. He's casting out evil spirits and healing even more people, including the mother of a certain local fisherman, a guy named Simon, who we also know as Simon Peter or Peter. And speaking of fishing, here's what happens next. Luke chapter 5, verse 1. It says, "One day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, the people were crowding round him and listening to the word of God. He saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from the shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, 'Put into deep water and let down the nets for a catch.' Simon answered, 'Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything, but because you say so, I will let down the nets.' When they had done so, they had caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break." So they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken, and so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people." So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him. Okay. So now that we're done with the story, the roadblock, all right? So we're talking about the roadblock, and this roadblock that we're going to talk about, it pertains to this story. It could also pertain to some of the other stories that Luke records, as well as the stories that the other biographers of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, and John, record as well, okay? The roadblock, here it comes in one word: weird. These stories seem weird. I mean, these stories seem far-fetched. They seem illogical. These stories don't seem to make sense. These stories don't seem to add up. I mean, think about the story that we just read. I mean, it's a fish story, right? And the fish story, right, out of the blocks seems fishy, doesn't it? I mean, it seems fishy. Here we've got professional fishermen coming away from a night fishing where they get skunked, they go 0 and along comes this carpenter or a stonemason. The tekton is the Greek word that refers to Jesus' occupation. A tekton comes along from landlocked Nazareth and tells these guys how to fish, and he tells them to fish in exactly the wrong place, okay, in the depths, going into the deep water rather than the shallows where the fish normally are. The wrong place and also the wrong time. He wants them to fish during the day instead of at night when the fishing is the best, all right? And lo and behold, 99 times out of 100, this doesn't work, right? And yet somehow it works. They've got 2 boats full of fish. And then verse 8, after the big catch, is that not only does the fish story seem fishy, but the response seems random. I mean, Peter, is it like, who said anything about sin? I mean, shouldn't your response be, hey, hey, Rabbi, so we want to offer you a job, and we've got a great spot for you on our team, and let me tell you, we'll pay top salary. We got full benefits, medical, dental, vision. We got stock options. What do you say? Well, what Jesus said was, well, how about you catch people instead? And that metaphor that he uses, that metaphor seems murky, man. I mean, fish for people? I mean, have you noticed is that fishing is not so good for the fish? How could that be good for people? The metaphor seems murky, but not only that, you know what? The conclusion seems unlikely. The conclusion, they leave everything and follow. I mean, come on. I mean, whatever happened to making a well-informed decision? Wouldn't you want to perform some due diligence? Maybe a background check on Jesus, receiving wise counsel from the elders, that sit at the city gates, talking to family members, taking some time to pray about, studying the Torah and see if this is God's will. I mean, so this story and other stories in the biographies of Jesus' life seem weird, don't they? And so what we need to do and seek to do is to try to look at the story through a different lens, through a different perspective. So let's try to unweird it. Let's go ahead and back up and examine the story again from the verse 1 at the top. It says, one day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, in other words, the Sea of Galilee, another name for the Sea of Galilee. In the Sea of Galilee, a body of water about 14 miles long, about 8 miles wide. And some of you have been there. And I've been there. We have taken 2 Terra Nova teams in the last 4 years, and that Galilee is where all the action is, because when you went there, is that you discovered is that most of the things that Jesus talked about and most of the things that he did happened in and around this lake. He says that when they were there by the Sea of Gennesaret, Sea of Galilee, the people were crowding around him and listening to the word of God. Now, here's a really interesting thing that Luke says, because now is Luke referring to Jesus talking to the crowd about the Torah, speaking about the Torah? Well, I think instead what Luke is doing is that he is already indicating that the words of God and the words of Jesus, they're the same. they're the same. So the next verse 2, it says that he saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. And it must have been mid-morning. The boats left there after a night of fishing. The nets were being tended. They were being cleaned out of, the water bottles and, sunglasses and flip-flops and stuff, stuff that, gets collected in the nets. You can imagine. And that they're cleaning and drying their nets on these wooden racks, and they're doing so that the nets won't rot, that they would be able to be used over and again. And so there they all are, the boats, the nets, the fishermen, Jesus, the crowds. Just another day down by the sea. Now Jesus, the next verse 3, is that he got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon. Simon, also known as Simon Peter, or also known as Peter. Okay, you've heard of Peter. Now, this is not the first time that Jesus and Peter have met. So he gets in the boat belonging to Simon and asks him to put out a little from the shore, saying, okay, let's just go ahead and paddle me out, 5 yards, 10 yards offshore. And then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. And so you can imagine the scene. There's the boat. It's just off the shore. There's the crowd. They're on the shore. Jesus now has got like this nice stage or a platform that he can speak to. They've got the audience that are on the shore, and then the audience of one in the boat. Peter is in the boat with Jesus. All right. When he had finished speaking, verse 4, he said to Simon, put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch. Now this is doable, but at the same time, it's unreasonable. I mean, in order for them to do that, they would have to go through the hauling and cleaning process all over again, but they'd have to do it in the heat of the day. And add to that, in verse 5, Simon answered, he said, Master, we've worked hard all night, okay? During prime fishing time, during the time that you're supposed to fish. And we haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets. Now, I want you to know something. This is not a belief thing. Jesus didn't ask Peter to believe something. He asked him to do something. He asked him to take a step. And when they had done so, not when they had prayed so, not when they had felt so, not when they had thought so, not when they had intended to, and then we learn in session 2 of investigating Jesus is that the doing is the thing that makes the difference. When they had taken that step, when Peter had finally, acquiesced and says, okay, all right, and goes back to the shore and gets, his partner and says, okay, so guys, we're going to take the nets and we're going to put them back on the boat, all our fishing tackle, all of our gear and such, and that we're going to paddle out in the middle of the day into the depths of the lake. I know we got skunked last night, and I know that's not where we're supposed to fish, but you know what? The rabbi wants us to. We got to kind of, make a good world for him. And off they went. And Luke, who in 5 words, when they had done so, compresses what must have taken hours for them to gear up, paddle out, go fishing. And when they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. And so they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats. So they were so full, they began to sink. Now, when Simon Peter saw this, he cried out, we're rich. We won't have to work for weeks. No. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' feet and said, go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man. And with this response, it seems that Peter was becoming aware that the guy that was with him in the boat was no mere man. He was something special. He was a rabbi, or maybe he was a prophet, or maybe he was even the Messiah himself, but whoever he was, this was a godly man. This was a holy man. This was a man from God, and that he just began to recognize how unholy he was. And so reflexively, he had just been taught is that you need to keep your distance. You need to keep your distance. And he certainly saw that from the religious leaders. I mean, that's what they did in his town. And maybe this is when then Luke would want to grab us by the shoulders or grab us by the collar and say, hey guys, that's why I had to tell the story. Because everyone needs to know that God has come near. He's come near. He's come near to draw us near. Then Jesus said to Simon, don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people. Now, again, that's weird. I mean, what comes to mind? People in nets, people with hooks in their rock and drug along. What does that look like? Well, we'll know this. Is that the sea held a place in the Jewish mindset that was not a comforting place. You see, Jews were not mariners. They were desert folk. And so to them then, the seas represented a fearful, dark place. It was a place of dread and despair. In other words, the sea symbolized evil, an abyss from which there was no return. And so Jesus' message to Peter in saying, you get to fish for people, what he's saying here is that you get to pull people out of darkness. You get to pull people out of the abyss. You get to pull people out of death and into life. And you know what it was? It was the invitation of a lifetime. See, it's like Jesus is saying, Peter, he casts this vision for his life, right? He says, from now on, this is what you get to do, and it's going to be great. It's as if Jesus is saying, Peter, sure, you could go ahead and just continue to keep fishing and to have your fishing company and to make a living for your family and to settle down and just to lead a quiet life. But you were made for more. Peter, you were made for more. You were made for greatness. And I have great things that I want to do through you. That's what Jesus is sharing with Peter and saying, hey man, from now on, you get to fish for people. And so it happened that Peter did that work, fishing for people. In fact, Luke writes in his second book to Theophilus, it's the book of Acts, in Acts chapter 2, is that Peter stands before a crowd. He's now in the city of Jerusalem. He stands before this crowd, and it's several days after Jesus had been taken outside the city of Jerusalem and crucified, and then 3 days after, there are rumors that his tomb was empty. And Peter stands up and testifies about Jesus, and at the day's end, there's 3,000 people who say, we'll follow also. And you can imagine Peter at the end of that day looking at the people and perhaps thinking about that day a while ago where there were 2 boats filled with fish. And now there are people that would fill up more than 2 boats. And probably wondering in amazement, my God, look what you've done. Look what you've done. And look what God had done through Peter of taking people out of darkness, out of the abyss, out of despair, and into light, into life, into eternal life, into everlasting life, into what the scriptures call that life that is life indeed. Now Peter's story, you might know much of Peter's story. Most of the world knows Peter's story. Much of the world throughout the ages knows Peter's story. And we know this because, you know what? They've named hospitals after Peter. They've named universities after Peter. They've named buildings, St. Peter's Basilica, after Peter. People have named their children after Peter. And none of that could have happened. He could have passed on the invite and spent the rest of his days and his nights in that boat, but he took a step, just one step on that day. And if Peter were here retelling his story, I believe this is what he would say to us. I believe he would say, whatever your next step is, take it. Take it. And so you see, here at Terra Nova, is that we believe that everyone has a next step spiritually. And we believe that those steps, they would look as different for as many different people that are here together today. I believe that a next step for you might be to get baptized. And we've got baptisms coming up in a couple of weeks. And you believe, yeah, you know what? God's been speaking to you. That's your next spiritual step. For some of you, it might be to come to the Terranova tour this afternoon because you know your next step is to try to get into a deeper relationship with this church or really try to figure out church. Maybe that's why you'd want to come. For some of you, maybe your next step is to serve. It's to not just sit, but to serve and to be a part of the serving teams that are here at Terranova. Some of you, your next step is to be known, is to join a life group. You haven't done that yet. And that, you know what, it's like your conscience or it's God speaking or whatever it is. It's just something that is an inkling or an impression or something where you feel like that God is speaking to your heart, is saying that's the next thing that you need to do. That's your next step. Maybe your next step is to give generously. Maybe your next step is more nuanced. Maybe your next step is to make that apology. Maybe your next step is to forgive. Maybe your next step is to have that difficult conversation. Maybe your next step is to get help for that addiction, that thing that seems to have control over you. Or maybe your next step would be the same step that Peter took. Maybe your next step is to fish for people. Your next step is to walk across the room and to have that conversation, that spiritual conversation with belief with that person that you know. Maybe your next step is to invite, is to think about a person that needs to be a part of this community and that has a spiritual step that they need to take as well, and that you can invite them and need to invite them to Terranova, maybe to invite them next week. And all of us have got a next step spiritually. And I got to tell you, as we consider that step, as we think about this step, is that, full warning, full disclosure, fair warning, is that often in my life, I'll just personalize it when God has asked me to take a next step, is that oftentimes it has felt uncomfortable. And oftentimes it has felt risky. But in pushing through those things, the discomfort and the risk, I'm wondering if we could together just kind of grab this beautiful vision, this beautiful idea, is that next step that God has been impressing on your heart might be the invitation of a lifetime. It might be a game changer for you. It might redirect the course of your life. God might use it in such a way that you just couldn't describe, or you couldn't even imagine. I mean, who knows where it will lead and how it will count if you take that next step. I mean, who knows? Well, God knows. God knows. And now finally back to our story. Here's Peter and his friends responding to the invitation of a lifetime. So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him. Everything. Which on the surface seems rash and impulsive to us, but think about it. If we would have too, if Jesus had done something like that for us. See, actually, according to Luke and Peter, is that Jesus did more than that for us. See, I think Peter would be quick to tell us, Jesus did this fish trick, and I began to follow, but it's nothing compared to what he did for you. You see, years after that day in the lake, is that Peter tries to describe the lengths that Jesus would go to give himself to the world. And so he takes us back to that Friday that Jesus was crucified. And Peter reflects on that dreadful day, what he witnessed and what he meant, and he put it in a letter that we can read. It's a letter that is in our New Testament. It's a letter that's known as 1 Peter. It was written to a group of persecuted followers of Jesus in the Roman Empire in the first century of that time. And Peter writes it because there's just something that blew Peter away about Jesus. And what really blew Peter away was not 2 boats full of fish. It was this, and we can read it in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 23. He talks about Jesus. He says, when they hurled their insults at him, he didn't retaliate. He's saying, hey, you know what? I was there. I saw it. Okay, I was in the back of the crowd. I was kind of hiding out, but I saw it. I saw what happened. He goes on to say about Jesus, when he suffered, he made no threats. And Peter's just saying, like, who does that? In crucifixions, people are screaming. They are cursing. They are crying out. They're weeping. And yet here is Jesus making no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to the one who judged justly. What he was trying to point out here to his readers and to us is saying, guys, do you see that Jesus is the same in death as he was in life? He's loving, and he's trusting, and he's offering. And then he says about Jesus on that cross is that he himself bore our sins in his body on the cross so that we might die to sin and live for righteousness. And then he quotes the prophet Isaiah, hundreds of years before Jesus walked the earth. He says, for by his wounds you have been healed. And that's what Jesus has done for you. And that's why we follow. Not based on what Jesus will do for you, but on what he has done for you. And we are going to remember that through a time of communion this morning. And so what I'd love to do is to have the band come join me on the stage as we enter into a time that some church traditions call the Eucharist and others call the Lord's Supper, but we call communion here. And as they step on up here, let me just share with you that this is a time that in a few moments that we are going to take into ourselves the body that represents, the bread which represents Christ's body, and the cup that represents Christ's blood. And these are reminders of Jesus' love for us, because love in its purest and simplest form is a sacrifice. And Jesus sacrificed his life for our life. He died our death so that we could live. And so in a moment, the band is going to lead us, and while we sing this song, is that you'll have an opportunity to go to any of the tables that are around the room to take the bread and the cup. And as you do, I would just invite you to seek God in prayer with this question. The question is this, God, what's my next step? God, what's my next step? God, what's my version of take me fishing for me? God, what's my version of row out into deep waters for a catch for me? You know, for some of you, is that your next step is, I'm ready to follow. I'm ready to follow Jesus. And if that's your next step, we just want to say, take it. It's the invitation of a lifetime, and it will change your life. And you can use this time of communion as a time to receive Jesus, who he is as the way and the truth and the life. And, you know, you might not have all the what you believe and why you believe questions answered in your mind as you do, and that might not be all ironed out. That's okay. Just know that there are those here who could tell you it's the best decision that you could ever make. You see, Jesus asks for everything, but he offers more. And you were made for more. So this is our time of communion. It's a time of being together with God. It's a time where we draw near to him. And as we draw near to him, is that we know is that he's always reaching out to us. And so I'd like you to stand together with me, and let's go ahead and sing with the band as they lead us.
Into the quietness of your grace, away from the beside you. Everything I need, goodness and mercy, following me, right here beside you. I've got everything I need. Goodness and mercy, following me. Wherever you go, I know I will follow. Oh, I will follow you. Wherever you go, I know I will follow. I will follow you. Wherever you go, I know I will follow. I will follow you. Wherever you go, I know I will follow. I will follow you. I will follow you.
As we stand here in a moment that we've tried to carve out for God, maybe ask you to close your eyes and continue that for a second, and maybe ask in prayer the question that is begged by something Lyle brought up for us, and that is, Lord, what's my next step? To ask that honestly, what's my next step? What's my next step? And for some of us, we kind of already know. And it's something real specific. For some of us, maybe it's a lot more vague. For some of us, maybe we have our own levels of defense that have been built up to even hearing maybe the answer to that question. But here's something I believe, and maybe you believe too. There's always a next step. God is always leading us a step further, and it's always a step that takes us further out of ourselves and maybe our own self-protection, out of ourselves and into more love. So God, we ask you today, what's your next step for us? What's your next step for me? Where are you wanting to lead me? What area of my life are you wanting to take deeper or grow stronger? What relationship do I need to mend? What's my next step? What's my next step? And we just want to say, especially for those of us who call ourselves your followers, we want to say we'll follow you. I mean, that's really what it means. That we'll follow you wherever that is, however uncomfortable, however risky, whatever it requires of us to go a little deeper, to take another step further. We're going to follow you because we know that's where the green pasture is. That's where life is. That's where our best life will be. So we want to say yes to following you with our whole hearts today. In Jesus' name. You know, if you would like more of what we just spent time doing, we're actually going to create some space here in a couple of weeks on Sunday night, March 19th, for a night of worship and prayer and communion. And I think as followers of Jesus, we would love to see the life of Jesus, the way of Jesus, that kingdom of God invade our own community, just as it had in Luke's days, what he got to see and what he tried to express to us in his 2-volume historical work, that we would love to be in this experience where the life of Jesus, that grace, that truth, that elevation, that hope, that honesty, is being experienced not only by ourselves fully, but by everybody around us. And so as we head into Easter, we're going to be just carving out this time to pray, to ask for God's ways and His Spirit to empower us as well, and for His life to fill not only this community, but our surrounding community. And so I want to invite you to join us. It's going to be a family-friendly thing. We're going to have an unhosted nursery open and care for maybe the youngest of our children, but it's a family-friendly thing where you can bring your kids in to experience this as well together. But that's coming up in a couple of Sunday nights, and love to have you be a part of it. I'm going to ask you to grab a seat for just a second and remind you of a couple of things before we take off. And one of them is that Connect card I told you about earlier. I said you had the service to work on this, and you can drop it in the offering basket at the end of the service. That time has come. So this is that aforementioned into the service time. So grab this, finish putting the details on it. You can drop that in the offering basket on the way out. And of course, you can drop this flyer in the basket on the way out, this Random Acts of Kindness Weekend flyer. Join us, jump in, be a part of making God's love famous. And of course, you can drop your giving envelopes in the offering basket on the way out. And you can mail these in. They're pre-postage paid, and so you can mail those in as well if you want to take that home and finish working on that. And of course, you can give online and on our Terra Nova app, and you can now give on Venmo too at our Terra Nova. And you can set up recurring giving online and on the app and on this envelope super easily, and that's what a lot of you do, and you found that maybe the easiest way just to be in the rhythm of doing so. And I'll tell you, we believe that generosity changes the world, and it really does, not only our individual generosity, but especially our collective generosity. We talk about this from time to time, that we do so much more together than any of us ever would or could by ourselves. And this is what actually pays for and fuels even things like the Not So Random Acts of Kindness Weekend and so many of the other things that we're constantly doing to make God's love famous, because we believe that kind of generosity just changes the world. And so this is a great time for you to engage in that and be a part of that with us. Don't forget that right after our 11 a.m. service, we have Terra Nova tours coming up, free lunch, free childcare, and walk-ons are available. So if you want to come back and be a part of that, love to have you. And then we'll love to see you next weekend for part 5 of our series. And hey, you know what? Why not grab that You Were Made for More business card sitting right next to you, hand that to somebody this week, pass that on, and invite them to come back with you as we continue this series that I hope you've been loving. And we're just going to keep going with it, Investigating Jesus, How We Know and Why We Follow, part 5 next weekend. Hey, God bless you guys. Have a fantastic Sunday, and we'll see you back next weekend for part 5 of our series.